My name is Liora Vance, and at 32, I stood in a ballroom filled with polished strangers and family ghosts, watching my own father toast to a future I wasn't part of. But the part that gutted me wasn't his indifference. It was the smile on my brother Torin's face, wide, smug, and rehearsed, like he knew I'd be erased tonight, and couldn't wait to watch it happen. What none of them realized was that the woman they dismissed in heels and silence was carrying the one truth that could set the whole house on fire. Have you ever wondered what it feels like? To be the extra seat at your own family table, kept warm just long enough to be pushed away? It started with crystal glasses clinking and the faint scent of my mother's perfume, still trapped in the folds of my dress, even though she'd been gone 5 years. The grand ballroom of our estate in Asheville shimmered under chandeliers like frozen fireworks. Golden light spilled over velvet drapes, polished floors, and silver trays carried by waiters I didn't recognize anymore. I walked in alone. The sound of my heels echoed with too much clarity, and I felt the weight of every gaze land on me like a verdict. A few smiles, some tight, some too wide, but most people just whispered, sipping from flutes of vintage cruelty. I adjusted the black satin on my wrist. Armor, not fashion. Across the room, my father stood tall beside the podium, Harlan Vance still commanding even in retirement. The custom tuxedo didn't soften his edges. Nothing ever did. Next to him, my brother Torin leaned lazily against the railing, nursing his third drink, tie undone like he was already king. My father's voice cut through the music like a blade. "Thank you all for coming. Tonight marks not an end, but a beginning." He raised his glass, crystal catching light, his smile carefully choreographed. "I built Vance Realty from the ground up, and now I pass the torch to the one most suited to carry our legacy forward." My breath caught. My hands, resting lightly on the clutch I hadn't unclenched all evening, tightened until the leather creaked. Torin stepped forward, chest puffed, smirk ready. My father continued, "My son, Torin Vance, will take over as CEO, leading us into a bold new era." Applause erupted, a few cheers. But I heard the silence behind it, the calculated omission. No mention of his daughter, no acknowledgement, not even a courtesy nod. Torin raised his glass toward me like a dare, then whispered something to the woman beside him that made her laugh behind her hand. I stayed rooted to the marble floor, fingers tingling, blood roaring in my ears. Someone brushed past me, murmuring, "Poor thing, must be hard." Another, "Well, she was always the quiet one, wasn't she?" My heart was pounding now, but my face held. It always did. I'd learned to smile through storms, to blink slowly when they wanted a reaction, to disappear without leaving the room. My father's speech droned on about values, vision, family tradition, all things he weaponized when convenient. And still, I stood there. Because walking out would feel like losing twice. Suddenly, a familiar voice behind me. "Liora?" Soft, female, uncertain. I turned. It was Mrs. Delaney, one of my mother's old friends. Her eyes flicked to my father on the podium, then back to me, her voice hushed. "He didn't even mention you." "I noticed," I said, managing a tight smile. My throat burned. Behind the curtain of forced celebration, I scanned the room for someone, anyone, who might have seen me. But all I saw were polished backs, fake laughter, raised glasses. I started walking toward the side hallway. The clinking of forks on porcelain and bursts of laughter followed me like static. In the corridor, quieter, dimmer, I leaned against the cool wall and exhaled. The chandelier's glow didn't reach here, just a low golden sconce, flickering like it wasn't sure it wanted to be on tonight. I touched the necklace around my neck, an old locket I hadn't taken off in years. Inside my mother's photo, soft eyes, a smile that said nothing and everything. What would she say if she saw this? I didn't realize how tightly I was holding the chain until I felt the imprint in my palm. Voices drifted from the ballroom again, cheers and a toast. Then Torin's voice, loud and sharp. "Let's be honest, if Liora ran this place, we'd be bankrupt in a week." The crowd laughed. Not everyone, but enough. And just like that, the air shifted. I turned back, walked toward the bar, slowly. Let them see me, let them feel the silence I carried. At the edge of the crowd, a young waiter stepped in front of me, startled. "Miss Vance?" His voice barely a whisper. I nodded. He slipped a folded note into my hand, then vanished into the crowd. I stared at it. Cream envelope. No name. But something about the weight. It didn't feel like a joke. I opened it slowly, heart thudding. Inside, a single sentence written in looping cursive. She left more than memories. Look deeper. My fingers trembled, and for the first time that night, my father's voice, his legacy, his empire, his erasure, faded behind the echo of someone else, my mother. My fingers closed around the note like it might vanish if I let go. She left more than memories. Look deeper. I slipped it into my clutch before anyone noticed, heart pounding so loud I was sure it echoed off the ballroom walls. For a second, it felt like the chandelier light above dimmed, as if the truth had shifted something in the room. I turned slowly, trying to blend back into the crowd, but the air had changed. I could feel it crawling on my skin. Then I heard it, the clink of silverware on glass, and my father's voice, smooth and rehearsed, slicing through the hum of conversation. "If I could have your attention once more," he said, stepping back up to the microphone. I froze mid-step. Everyone did. "My legacy," he continued, "is not just in the bricks and beams of Vance Realty. It's in the hands that will carry it forward." Torin's smirk was already forming. "I'm proud to announce that my son, Torin Vance, will take the helm of the company I built from scratch." The crowd broke into applause. Champagne glasses lifted like they'd just won something. But he wasn't done. His eyes locked onto mine, cold, flat, deliberate. "As for my daughter, Liora," he paused, smiled faintly. "She'll always have a place in the world, perhaps even at Wendy's if she's fortunate." A beat, then laughter. First a chuckle from the left, then someone near the front guffawed, and then the floodgates opened. The kind of laughter that bites, that strips skin from bone. I couldn't move. My nails dug into my palm. My legs felt rooted to the marble. My mouth went dry. Across the room, Torin leaned into the mic, his voice dripping with mock concern. She'd probably mess that up too. Another burst of laughter. Even the bartender smiled behind the rim of a glass. I stared at my father. His face was calm, not triumphant, not gloating, just indifferent, like I wasn't his daughter, but a passing inconvenience. I thought I was prepared for humiliation, but not this, not the precision of it, not the way he wielded his silence like a scalpel. My throat burned. Behind my eyes, heat gathered, but no tears came. Not yet. Instead, I heard my mother's voice. Not real, just memory. Soft and steady, like she used to say when I came home bruised from middle school fights. "If they're laughing, it means they're afraid of what you know, what you carry." But what did I carry now? I turned and began walking away, slow, controlled steps past the still laughing crowd. Every pair of eyes I passed was a needle. Every whispered, "Did you hear that?" Another stitch in the wound. The hallway outside felt like a tunnel, narrower than before. My breath came in shallow bursts. I pushed open the bathroom door and locked it behind me. Inside, warm golden sconces lined the mirror, marble countertops, everything perfect, except me. I gripped the edge of the sink and stared at my reflection. Not a tear had fallen, but my jaw ached from clenching. My shoulders were locked tight. My pulse thudded in my ears. Was this what they'd wanted? To see me break? To see me disappear without raising my voice? I thought of that letter again, and for the first time in months, I whispered my mother's name aloud. "Nina." Just the sound of it cracked something open, but I didn't cry, not yet. I dabbed under my eyes, smoothed my dress, and when I left the bathroom, I walked taller. Still bruised, yes, but less breakable. Outside, I crossed paths with Torin near the hors d'oeuvres table. He was laughing with two men in suits I didn't recognize, but his eyes flicked to me the second I stepped near. "Well," he said, tone mock cheerful, "you made quite the impression tonight." I didn't answer, just stared. He leaned in slightly, lowering his voice so only I could hear. "Don't look so surprised, sis. You've always been the family mascot, not a player." I tilted my head. "Is that what you think?" "It's what Dad thinks." "I just say it out loud." Then he reached for a canapé, turned his back, and resumed laughing with the men like I'd vanished. But I hadn't. Not entirely. Not yet. I walked out toward the garden, my mother's garden. The air was cooler there, quieter. Night had fallen completely, and the trees shivered slightly in the breeze. I sat on the stone bench she used to favor, ran my fingers along the moss-covered edges. This was where she'd whisper secrets, where she told me stories about her own battles with Dad. I closed my eyes and replayed every word in that note again. She left more than memories. Look deeper. What did that mean? Was it about the company? The house? Something hidden? A breeze picked up, brushing loose strands of hair across my face, and in the hush of wind and crickets, I let myself remember the attic, dusty, off-limits, sealed after Mom passed. I hadn't gone up there in years, but suddenly the thought rooted in my brain. Maybe that's what she meant. Maybe that's where I needed to look. I stood slowly, brushing off my dress. Behind me, I could still hear faint music from the ballroom. Laughter, toasts, my father's voice like a shadow on glass, but in front of me, there was only the garden path, and the growing certainty that something was waiting. I turned back toward the house, the note safe in my clutch, and as I stepped through the side hallway again, I passed a waiter who didn't meet my eyes. But something in his hand caught my attention, another folded envelope tucked discreetly on a tray. He passed me, didn't speak, but the envelope was gone, and a sudden thought chilled me. If someone was watching me, who else knew what my mother left behind? The ballroom faded behind me as I climbed the garden path toward the west wing, my mother's wing. Most of it had been locked up since she passed, her room untouched, her studio sealed, but I still knew how to get in. There was a side door hidden under the ivy wall, the keyhole covered in rust. I fished in my clutch for the old brass skeleton key, the one I'd never returned. My fingers shook as I slid it in. The lock turned with a reluctant click. Inside, everything smelled like lavender and something older, something forgotten. The air was stale, and yet, somehow it still carried her. The floor creaked beneath my heels, the silence thick enough to slow my breath. Moonlight spilled through lace curtains, painting soft shadows on the hardwood. I crossed to her vanity, the one with the oval mirror that always caught the afternoon light just right. Her brush still lay there, her perfume bottle half full. It felt like she'd just stepped out for a moment. But she'd been gone for 5 years. I opened the top drawer. Dust, a few dried flower petals, a gold earring I thought she'd lost. Then I saw it. An envelope, yellowing at the edges, her handwriting unmistakable. Liora. Just my name. No date, no return address. But I knew the curve of her L like I knew my own reflection. My throat tightened. I sat on the edge of the bed and turned it over slowly. Inside was a single folded letter, written in soft blue ink. My darling girl, if you're reading this, it means they've begun shutting you out. I tried to stop it, but I was already too late. I knew the moment I got sick that they would twist everything once I was gone. I stopped breathing. My eyes scanned the page again and again, not sure I believed what I was reading. You must look deeper. There is more than they let you see. I hid something in the attic, something that proves the truth. But be careful. Harlan never forgives and never forgets. Torin is his reflection, not his son. I read the last line 3 times. Don't let them bury you. Find what I left and use it. The words were steady, deliberate, like she'd known exactly how this would play out, like she'd watched it happen before it ever did. I folded the letter back into its envelope, but my hands wouldn't stop trembling. My mother had hidden something big, and she'd known what they would do to me. How? I thought about the retirement bash downstairs, the way Torin had laughed, the way Dad had looked at me like I was nothing more than a social hiccup. Suddenly I couldn't sit still. I stood, pacing. My mother's voice echoed again. Use it. But use what exactly? What had she seen? What had she left behind? My eyes flicked toward the ceiling. The attic. Of course. But I hesitated. It was late, and I didn't know who else might still be awake. I turned off the light and stepped out quietly, locking the door behind me. Back in my old bedroom, now a guest room rarely touched, I dropped the envelope into the inside pocket of my coat. I didn't sleep. I barely even blinked. Instead, I sat by the window, watching the wind shift the tree branches and wondering how long my mother had been preparing for this moment. Had she known they would erase me? Had she tried to warn me, and I just didn't listen? The memory hit fast, like a slap. I was 10. Mom had taken me to her studio after one of Dad's outbursts. She lit a candle, played music, gave me a cookie. "You know what we do with pain, Liora?" she asked. I had sniffled and shrugged. "We make it a map." I hadn't understood then, but maybe I did now. She'd mapped it for me. I just had to follow. As the first hint of dawn crept into the sky, I made my way down the corridor again. Slippers on, no sound, just the faint rustle of fabric and the ticking of the grandfather clock downstairs. I reached the pull-down ladder to the attic and paused, hand hovering. Was someone else already up there? I waited, listened, nothing. With a breath, I pulled the rope. The ladder dropped with a muffled creak. The attic air was colder than I remembered. It smelled of cedar and dust and time. I stepped onto the wooden boards, careful not to make them groan too loud. Boxes, old paintings, a cracked mirror, and in the corner, an old chest I didn't recognize. I moved toward it slowly, heart thudding. But just as I reached it, a board creaked behind me. I spun, empty, no one. But a flicker of motion caught my eye from the window. A shadow, tall, watching, then gone. I ran to the window and scanned the garden below. Nothing. But someone had been there, watching the attic, watching me. The letter in my coat pocket suddenly felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. Who else knew what my mother left behind? And how far would they go to keep me from finding it? The attic floor felt colder that morning, not in temperature, but in presence, like the air itself was holding its breath. I stood at the top of the ladder, staring into that familiar gloom, the letter from my mother still pressed against my chest under my coat. Dust floated in the angled sunlight pouring through a cracked skylight, tiny motes drifting like ghosts. Everything looked the same, and yet nothing did. Boxes stacked high, their corners sagging. A rocking horse with a chipped ear. My 4th grade spelling bee trophy still leaning against an old trunk. But there, tucked in the far corner, half buried under a sheet, something metal glinted. I stepped slowly across the creaking floorboards, heart thudding harder with each breath. I didn't blink until I'd knelt in front of it. An old cast-iron safe, the edges worn, the black paint blistered with time, and carved faintly into the lower corner, my mother's initials. NHV Nina Helena Vance. I traced them with my fingertips. She'd marked it, claimed it, hidden it, but hadn't left the combination. "Come on, Mom," I whispered. "You wouldn't lead me here without a way in." I twisted the dial, left to 12, right to 34. Click, nothing. Back the other way, nothing again. I sat back on my heels, wiping dust from my palms onto my jeans. Why a safe? Why here? And more importantly, what had she hidden that was worth protecting? I leaned against a wooden beam, exhaling through my teeth. Then I remembered the line from her letter. Find what I left, and use it. She wasn't just warning me. She was guiding me, mapping it. The attic was just one piece. I stood and began rummaging through the boxes closest to the safe. Journals, photos, newspaper clippings, nothing out of place, except for one box that had clearly been opened more recently. No dust, edges too crisp. Inside, file folders, yellowed receipts, a stack of old bank statements addressed to both my parents. I flipped through them absently until I reached the last folder. It was empty, except for a single Post-it note stuck to the inside flap. One word, scribbled in blue ink, hope. I stared at it. It wasn't my mother's handwriting, smaller, sharper. And that single word hit harder than I expected. Hope. What was it supposed to mean? Was it the combination? Or another breadcrumb? Before I could think further, the floorboard behind me groaned, louder than it should have. I turned fast, hard in my throat. Nothing, no one, but my skin prickled. And then from the far attic window, I saw it, a figure, still, watching, just outside. I rushed to the window, pulled aside the tattered curtain. Too late. All I caught was the tail of a coat disappearing down the garden path. Someone had been watching me, from below, from that same corner of the estate where my mother used to keep her greenhouse, now just overgrown vines and broken glass. I backed away from the window, breath shallow, pulse sprinting. Was it Torin, one of Dad's staff, or someone I hadn't even considered? They knew I was up here. They knew I'd found the safe, and worst of all, they hadn't tried to stop me. Not yet. Because maybe they didn't need to. Maybe they were waiting for me to dig my own grave. I knelt back at the safe, pressed my forehead lightly against the cold metal. Please, I whispered. One word, one prayer, not to be saved, but to outsmart them. Then I stood and left. Not in defeat, but in strategy. Back in the hallway, I closed the attic hatch gently, fingertips lingering on the rope. It was no longer just about me versus my father. This was about a truth someone had buried, and now wanted to keep buried. I walked through the corridor like I belonged there again, but the silence around me was sharp. In the dining room, I poured a glass of water and sat at the head of the long oak table, Dad's seat. The glass trembled slightly in my hand. I steadied it. Memories swarmed like wasps. That time I brought home a report card with all A's and no one looked up from their phone. That night I told Dad I wanted to start my own firm and he'd just said, "Torin is the business brain. You should stick to poetry." I wasn't angry. Not anymore. I was focused. The safe had something he didn't want me to see, and now I had a reason to tear everything apart until I did. I checked the time. Still early. Too early for confrontation, but not too early for suspicion. I reached for my phone and texted Mara. "Need a favor. Quiet. Fast. Trust only you. Call me." Then I slid the note from the attic into the inside pocket of my jacket, next to my mother's letter. 2 different handwritings, 2 different truths. One thing was clear. If I wanted answers, I'd have to look further back than I ever had before and pray I wasn't already too late. It didn't take long. By noon, the game began. I was in the sunroom, staring through a pane of dusty glass at the overgrown path beyond the estate, still thinking about the safe, about the initials carved like a whisper into iron, when Juliet, the house manager, appeared with a stiff smile. "Your father would like to see you in the study." She said it like a formality, but her eyes didn't meet mine. I followed the hall slowly, each step echoing against parquet floors that remembered better days. The study door was already cracked open. Inside, Harlan Vance sat behind his desk, mahogany, imposing, same one he'd had since I was a teenager. The fireplace was cold, the curtains drawn. The only light came from the green banker's lamp on the corner of his desk, throwing long shadows across his face. He didn't stand when I entered. Liora. Just my name, nothing more. Torin sat in the armchair by the bookshelves, legs crossed, suit sharp, expression sharper. "Sit," my father said. It wasn't a suggestion. I did, slowly. He leaned forward, folding his hands, voice steady. "You've had time to process the events of last night." I said nothing. "Humiliation is a bitter pill," he continued, "but clarity tends to follow." Torin chuckled. "You took it well, though. Impressive." I glanced at him but didn't blink. Instead, I turned to my father. "What is this about?" He slid a folder across the desk toward me. "An opportunity," he said, "to avoid unnecessary conflict." My fingers hovered before touching it. "You want me to sign away any claims to Mom's estate," I said flatly. Torin leaned in, grin curling. "Let's not play pretend. You weren't left anything. The company's always been mine. You've just been lingering." The folder was warm where his hands had pressed it. Inside, legal jargon, release clauses, non-disclosure agreements. At the bottom of the final page, a line for my signature, and the sum they were offering me, $25,000. I looked up, stunned. "That's what you think I'm worth?" Harlan's voice didn't change. "It's more than fair. You have no controlling interest, no legal leverage. Sign it and move on with your life." My hand clenched around the edge of the folder. "Is that what you told Mom before she died?" His eyes darkened. "You don't know what you're talking about." "But you do," I said softly. "You always did." Torin pushed off the armrest. "We can drag this out in court if you want. But it won't end well for you, Liora. You know how this game works." I stared at him, at his smug, perfect posture. The boy who never heard no. The man who thought women were obstacles, not opponents. I stood. "You're right," I said. "I do know how this game works." And I walked out without touching the pen. In the hallway, my hands trembled, not from fear, but rage, and underneath that, something sharper, resolve. Back in the garden, the light had changed, overcast now, the shadows less defined. I sat on the stone bench again, cold seeping through my jeans. The note from the safe still burned in my coat pocket. and the last word my father had said echoed like thunder. "You don't know what you're talking about." But I would find out. My phone buzzed. I pulled it out with a half-thought it might be Juliet or even Torin again, but it wasn't. Mara. "Meet me. I found something." Just that. No punctuation, no emojis, just urgency. I stared at the message, reading it 3 times. My heart skipped. I texted back, "Me, where?" Her reply came instantly. "Mara, Charlotte, Crescent Cafe, noon tomorrow, don't tell anyone." I stared at the screen. The cafe we used to go to in college. Quiet, back corner, no one we knew. I stood slowly, every bone in my body humming with something I hadn't felt in days. Hope. Maybe she'd found proof. Maybe there was more to what Mom left than a dusty safe and half-written warnings. Maybe this wasn't just about inheritance anymore, but about a legacy stolen in slow motion. I headed back into the house, careful, quiet. No one stopped me. No one saw me smile, not yet. The Crescent Cafe hadn't changed much. Same dusty window panes, same chipped teal tiles, same crooked open sign that flickered like it needed a second chance. I slipped inside, the bell above the door giving a soft jingle that sent a dozen memories crashing through me. The scent of burnt espresso beans and old lemon cleaner wrapped around my coat like a familiar ghost. Mara was already at the back booth, black turtleneck, hair pulled into a messy knot, glasses low on her nose as she hovered over her laptop. She looked up the second I approached. "You came," she said. I slid into the seat across from her, trying to read her face, but Mara had always been a poker player. She gestured to the mug in front of me. "Hazelnut latte, no syrup, still your thing?" My throat tightened. "Yeah, thanks." We sat in silence for a beat, just long enough to feel the weight of everything between us. Then she reached into her leather satchel and pulled out a thin manila folder. It made a faint scrape as she slid it across the table to me. I opened it slowly. Inside, a single notarized document. The paper was yellowed but sharp. The embossed seal still crisp, and there it was. Ownership transfer, 60% stake in Vance Realty, from Nina H. Vance to Liora M. Vance. Executed March 14, 2020. Signed, witnessed, certified. I couldn't breathe. This can't be real, I whispered. "It's real," Mara said. "I checked twice, then had my friend at the registrar's office check again." I read it again. Every word felt like a match striking inside me. "She did this before she died," I murmured. She knew. She'd seen them circling, preparing, and she'd made her move in silence. I looked up. Why didn't I know about this? Mara's face darkened. "Because someone didn't want you to." A chill crept up my spine. Harlan, of course. "If this document had surfaced after she passed," Mara continued, "you'd have controlled the company, not him, and definitely not Torin." I leaned back, trying to process it. Why didn't the attorney say anything? She shrugged. Maybe he didn't know, or maybe someone made sure he didn't. My pulse pounded in my ears. "Liora," Mara said, voice quieter now, "this changes everything." It did. Everything shifted in that booth. The walls, the weight of my family name, the balance of silence, they all tilted towards something new and dangerous. "But you have to be careful," she added. "If Harlan finds out you have this, he'll come for you, with lawyers, threats, distractions, maybe worse." I folded the document carefully and slid it back into the folder. My hands were trembling now. "I'm not ready," I said. "Not yet. I don't even know where the safe's combination is, or if this is enough to—" "You don't need to be ready," Mara cut in, eyes locked on mine. "You need to be smart. Start documenting everything. Record every call, forward every email. This isn't just a family fight anymore. It's a legal war." I nodded slowly, but my insides were spiraling. What would Dad do if he found out? What would Torin do? Mara reached across the table, her fingers brushing mine. "I know what it's like to feel alone," she said, "but you're not. Not anymore." I didn't realize I'd been holding my breath until I let it go. Outside, the sky was graying, rain threatening the edges of the day. Inside, everything felt too bright, too sharp. I needed air. We stood. Mara packed the folder carefully into her satchel. "I'll scan you a copy," she said, "and I'll hold the original for now, just in case." "Okay," I said. We walked out together. The breeze slapped my cheeks awake. As we reached the sidewalk, she turned to me. You know this means war, right? I gave a dry laugh. I've been at war my whole life. I just didn't know I had a sword. Her smile faded, serious now. He's not going to lose quietly. I'm not going to win quietly, I said. A car passed, then another. Mara's eyes darted toward the corner across the street. A man in a gray coat stood half hidden behind a telephone pole, head down, hands in his pockets. Do you know him? She asked. I turned. The man shifted, stepped behind the corner wall, and disappeared. My stomach dropped. That wasn't a coincidence. I swallowed hard. Another reminder. They were watching, or listening, or both. Mara reached for my wrist. Liora, be careful. I nodded once, then turned and walked away, pulse echoing in my ears. Back in my car, I sat for a minute, gripping the steering wheel with white knuckles. What had started as humiliation had become something else. I had the document. I had the name. I had the truth. And somewhere in the shadows, someone knew I had it. The drive back from Charlotte felt longer than usual. Maybe it was the weight of the document Mara showed me, still tucked in the hidden pocket of my purse. Or maybe it was the feeling that clung to my skin like fog, something invisible, but undeniable. I kept checking the rearview mirror. Nothing unusual. Just the blur of headlights, the hiss of tires, the hum of a world moving too fast. Still, I felt it. That itch between my shoulder blades. The kind of dread you don't question. You just obey. I switched lanes. So did the car behind me. I slowed down to let them pass. They didn't. My fingers tightened around the steering wheel. That car, black SUV, tinted windows, no front plate, had been behind me since the exit ramp outside Raleigh. Coincidence, or the cost of knowing too much? I turned right at the next light without signaling. The SUV followed. Another turn. Another shadow in my mirror. Okay, I whispered, voice shaking. This is real. I tapped the phone on my passenger seat, hands clammy. 1 ring, 2, then, Liora? Mara's voice, sharp, awake. I think I'm being followed. Silence, then, where are you? Just past Glenwood, headed toward downtown, black SUV behind me, no tags. Can you see the driver? No, windows are too dark. Do not go home, she said. Get somewhere public, a parking lot, a gas station, anywhere with cameras. My mouth felt dry. I turned into a brightly lit strip mall, tires crunching over gravel. The SUV passed. It didn't stop, didn't hesitate, just kept driving. But my body stayed frozen behind the wheel, hands still locked in a death grip, heart rattling like loose change in my chest. Still there? Mara asked. Gone, I think, but it was real, she finished for me. I nodded, even though she couldn't see. Liora, she said quietly, he knows. I didn't ask who she meant. We both knew. Harlan, of course he knew. He had ears in courtrooms, eyes in banks, whispers in law offices. He didn't need to be in the room. He owned the room, and now he'd seen the shift in balance. He felt it, and he was sending a message. I pulled into a parking spot outside a 24-hour diner, the kind with flickering neon and a handwritten sign taped to the glass. No restrooms for non-customers. Inside, couples hunched over pie slices and teenagers laughed too loudly, but the windows felt like paper. I stayed in the car, phone pressed to my ear. I need to know, I said. Do we have enough? There was hesitation. We have leverage, Mara said, but if he thinks you're a threat, he'll do more than follow. He'll discredit, he'll smear, he'll bury you in paperwork and drown you in lawsuits before you even get to discovery. So what do I do? You do exactly what you've been doing, she said. You document. You don't flinch. And you don't go anywhere without eyes on you. A laugh escaped me, bitter. So I'm just supposed to live in paranoia? No, Mara said softly. You live like a woman who's got something worth stealing. I hung up and stared out at the diner's buzzing neon. A flickering E blinked like a warning. My reflection in the windshield looked older than I remembered. There were bags under my eyes, lines at the corners of my mouth I swore weren't there last week. I thought about my mother again. Her eyes, soft but never naive. Her hands, always still, even when Dad raised his voice. She'd known how to survive him, but she hadn't taught me how to fight him. She'd hidden things instead. hoped I'd be clever enough to find them. And now I had. The deed, the safe, the truth. But truth, I was learning, came with a cost. And someone, maybe more than one, was deciding what that cost would be. I finally stepped out of the car. The air had gone cold. A gust of wind swept through the parking lot, rustling trash against the curb. I walked into the diner just long enough to buy a coffee and ask the cashier, "Do your security cameras work?" She blinked. "I think so. Manager checks the feed every morning." Good enough. I sipped the scalding coffee as I walked back to my car. The SUV wasn't there, but now I knew how to look. Now I'd see them coming. I didn't go home that night. I drove to Mara's instead, parked 2 blocks away, walked the rest under the watch of orange streetlights. She opened the door before I knocked. "You're safe," she said. I wanted to believe her, but something inside me stayed locked. I sat on her couch, clutching the warm mug she handed me. "Mara," I said slowly, "what if this goes deeper than we think?" She met my gaze, silent. "Like, what if it wasn't just about money? What if it's something else? Something Mom found, something big enough to scare him?" Her face didn't change, but her fingers tapped her knee once. "I think," she said, "you need to go back to the safe." I nodded, and this time, I'd go prepared. But as I reached for my purse to pull out the deed copy, my breath caught. It was gone. My breath caught in my throat. Gone. The folder, the deed, the only solid proof that my mother had ever tried to protect me. Gone. I tore through the purse again, even though I already knew. It wasn't there, not even a corner of the paper. "Mara," I said, voice low and brittle. "I had it in this pocket, I swear. I didn't leave the car." Her eyes narrowed. She moved closer, inspecting the inside of the bag herself, flipping the lining like maybe I'd missed something, like it could still be hiding in the seams. Was it zipped? "I don't know. I think so. God, I don't know." My hands trembled now, not from fear, but the terrible edge of fury. "You didn't take it?" I asked, instantly regretting the way it came out. Her gaze met mine, wounded, but steady. "No." And I believed her. But that only left one answer. Someone else had gotten to it. And that meant someone had been closer than I thought. I barely slept that night. I lay on Mara's couch, the ceiling spinning overhead, my mind chewing through every frame of the last 24 hours. The man behind the telephone pole, the SUV, the open zipper. They weren't watching anymore. They were reaching in. By morning, my blood was vibrating beneath my skin. I couldn't sit still, couldn't sip the coffee Mara handed me. The only thing louder than the pounding in my chest was my mother's voice in my head. "Don't let them bury you." So I didn't. I drove straight back to the estate, tires screeching against the gravel drive, the sharp snap of the iron gates slamming behind me. Storm clouds hovered above the treetops, low and gray, like even the sky wanted to weigh me down. Juliet opened the front door, startled by my pace. "I need to speak to my father," I said. She blinked. I'll see if he's—" I said now. I didn't wait for permission. I knew exactly where he'd be. The study door creaked open, and there he was, Harlan Vance, reading the Wall Street Journal like nothing in the world could ever touch him. He didn't even look up. "Ah, back from your little city excursion?" I stepped inside and closed the door behind me. The click echoed like a shot. "I know," I said, "about the shares." That got his attention. His head lifted slowly, eyes narrowing, his hands stilled above the page. "I know Mom owned 60% of Vance Realty," I said, "and that she transferred them to me before she died. I've seen the deed. It was notarized." A pause. Then he laughed, not loud, not amused. It was quiet, calculated, dismissive. "I wondered when you'd find that." "You knew," I whispered. "Of course I knew," he said. "I let her play her games, Liora. Your mother always had a flair for drama." My chest tightened. "You erased it. You buried it." "I protected this family," he snapped, voice rising now. "From sentiment, from mistakes, from weakness." Torin appeared in the doorway, his smirk already formed. "Dad, what's going on? Oh, this again?" I turned on him. "You stole from her. You let him steal from her." Torin stepped into the room, arms crossed. "Your name wasn't on anything at the time of her death, Liora. A lot of things get lost in probate. It's how the world works." I took a step forward, rage pulsing through my fingertips. "She tried to protect me," I said. "She left something behind because she knew you'd do this, both of you." Harlan stood slowly. "And what exactly are you planning to do with that knowledge?" "I'm going to finish what she started." He rounded the desk, voice dropping low. "Let me be clear, daughter. You're already skating on ice thinner than your credibility. No one in this city will take your word over mine. Not the courts, not the board, not the press." Torin chimed in. "You want to ruin the company out of spite? That's your legacy now?" I stared at both of them, two men who never thought I'd show up to the fight. I felt the heat rise in my neck, the sting behind my eyes. "I don't care about your legacy," I said. "I care about hers." Silence stretched across the room like smoke. Then I turned on my heel and walked out. The marble floor under my boots felt colder than ever. Back in the garden, I stopped at the bench, her bench. The first drops of rain began to fall, tapping against the stone like tiny fists. I sat. I didn't cry. I didn't shake. I simply breathed. Once, then again, because even though they'd stolen the paper, they hadn't erased the truth. They couldn't. I still had the safe, and whatever she left inside. I pulled my phone from my coat. The screen lit up with a new message. Unknown number. "You missed something upstairs." I stared at it, heart racing, and just like that, I knew. The game wasn't over. It was just beginning. The text blinked on my screen like a dare. "You missed something upstairs." I read it 3 times, the chill blooming behind my ribs. Unknown number, no name, no context, just the message, and the storm it stirred in my chest. I stood from the garden bench, rain dripping off my coat now, my boots soft against the soaked grass. The estate loomed behind me, dark windows flickering with lamplight and secrets. Upstairs, it could have been bait. But then again, truth often is. I moved fast. Through the side entrance, up the servants' staircase, careful not to draw eyes. The second-floor hallway smelled like cedar and old polish. I passed portraits I hadn't looked at in years. My mother's eyes followed me in one. So did his. Then, my bedroom door. I hadn't touched this room in 5 years, not since the funeral, but the doorknob turned easily without resistance, and inside the air was stale, cold, waiting. I stepped in, fingers brushing the light switch. A faint yellow glow spread across faded floral wallpaper, dust-covered shelves, the window seat I used to curl up on when the house got too loud, and there, on the center of the bed, lay a manila envelope. My heart thudded. No note, no name, just that. I picked it up, breath held tight. Inside was a single typed page, crisp and clean. I read the words and felt the floor shift. A second will, drawn up 6 months before my mother died, signed, witnessed, notarized, naming me, Liora Vance, as the sole heir to her shares, her voting rights, and her portion of the estate. Everything. I couldn't speak, couldn't move. Then the voice behind me, "Now you understand." I turned so fast I nearly dropped the paper. Gideon Holt stood in the doorway, still in his charcoal suit, hair grayer than I remembered, but his presence sharp as ever. "You left this?" I asked. He nodded once. "Your mother gave it to me, said I'd know when the time was right." My mind spun. "And now is the right time?" He stepped inside. "Now the stakes are clear. Harlan's exposed. You have leverage, but you needed to feel the betrayal first. She knew that." I gripped the document tighter, trying to steady myself. "She always trusted you," I whispered. "She had reason to." "Why didn't you give this to me sooner?" He met my eyes. "Because if I had, you wouldn't have been ready, and they would have destroyed you before you ever stood a chance." I should have been furious, but beneath the fury was something else. Gratitude, even if it came too late for apologies. The doorbell rang downstairs, then the echo of laughter. I glanced at the time. The retirement bash was still going. Of course it was. I folded the will, slid it back into the envelope, and looked at Gideon. "Let's finish this." He gave me a slow nod. We walked down together, 2 shadows sliding past polished banisters and marble columns. The ballroom was in full swing, champagne flutes raised, music humming low, Torin in the center of a crowd like he'd already claimed his throne. My father stood near the fireplace laughing with a local judge. They didn't see me yet, but they would. Gideon stepped onto the small stage near the podium and tapped the mic. The sound cut through the chatter like glass breaking. "I'd like to say a few words," he said. All heads turned, some confused, some annoyed, but my father's expression turned stone. "Now's not the time, Gideon," he barked. "This is a private celebration." "Then you should have read the documents more carefully," Gideon said smoothly. "This concerns the estate, and everyone here should hear it." He reached into his inner coat pocket and pulled out a fresh copy of the will. "This document, signed by Nina Vance before her death, supersedes all prior arrangements. It designates full inheritance of her shares and estate rights to Liora Vance." Gasps rippled across the room. I stepped forward then, eyes locked on my father. He didn't move, but Torin did. He pushed through this crowd, eyes wide, fury blooming red on his face. "You can't be serious. That's fake. This is a setup." "Verified and notarized," Gideon said. Torin lunged, toward the stage, toward me, I couldn't tell. Security stepped in before he could reach us. 2 men in black suits held him back as he thrashed. "This is my legacy," he shouted. "She's nothing." Harlan stood frozen, not angry, not pleading, just calculating. And that scared me more than Torin's screams. He was already planning the next move, the lawsuit, the smear campaign, the war that would follow. But for a moment, just a flicker of a moment, I'd taken the throne back. I felt it in the silence, in the hush that followed Gideon's words, in the way people looked at me differently, like maybe I wasn't the footnote anymore. Gideon leaned closer, voice low. "This isn't over, but you landed the first strike." I nodded, breath catching. But then I saw it, across the ballroom, a woman in a black coat, standing still among the moving crowd, watching me. And when our eyes met, she mouthed something I couldn't hear, then disappeared into the hallway. My pulse jumped, because I knew her face, and she wasn't supposed to be alive. I hadn't even left the estate grounds before the lawsuits hit. The first email came at dawn, a terse subject line, Vance v. Vance, petition for injunction. Attached were court documents stamped with urgency. Torin was suing me, claiming fraud, forgery, conspiracy. By the time I reached Mara's apartment, she already had 3 voicemails and a cease and desist order waiting in her inbox. "I told you," she said, eyes red from zero sleep, "he wouldn't go down easy." We sat in silence, the coffee between us growing cold, my fingers wrapped tight around the chipped ceramic mug like it was the only solid thing in my life. The weight of everything pressed down, the second will, the missing deed copy, Gideon's bombshell, and now this, an all-out legal siege. The phone buzzed again. New notification. Motion filed to freeze all company accounts pending investigation. "They're trying to choke us," I said, barely above a whisper. Mara nodded. "Freeze the assets, drain your energy, drag it out until you walk away." "Or until I'm buried," I muttered. We both knew how this worked. This wasn't about justice. This was war by paperwork, and Torin had the kind of money that bought time, silence, and very hungry attorneys. But I had something he didn't. I had people. Not many, but enough. Within hours, Mara called in a favor with a cybersecurity friend. I reached out to Yvette, one of the few Vance Realty board members who'd always believed in my mother's vision. And I sent a quiet message to Eric Nguyen, the CFO Dad had hired years ago, but who used to slip me cookies during board meetings when I was 12. By noon, we had a meeting set up in a tiny conference room above an insurance agency in Midtown Raleigh. It was no war room, but it was ours. Eric came first, jaw tight, glasses slightly crooked like he'd left in a rush. "I'm risking a lot," he said, sitting down. "You need to make this worth it." I slid the notarized copy of the second will across the table. He read it once, then twice. His expression didn't change, but his shoulders did. They relaxed. "She really left it all to you." "She did." "And the deed?" "Gone. Stolen. But we're working on that." Eric nodded slowly. "Torin's already sent out internal memos. He's consolidating control, pressuring vendors to freeze contracts. But there's tension, especially after that public reveal. People are watching." Yvette walked in next, lips pressed in a tight line. She didn't say hello, just tossed a printed email onto the table. "What's this?" Mara asked. "A leak," Yvette said. "One of Torin's interns forwarded it to me before they cleared his inbox." I leaned in. The subject line was short. "We're covered." "The body?" A thread between Torin and a name I didn't recognize, Judge Renner. Discussion of a mutual understanding. Language like expedited ruling, buried evidence, and one particularly damning line, "She'll fold once it's clear there's no one listening." My breath hitched. Mara whispered, "That's enough to open an ethics complaint." "Assuming Renner doesn't squash it before it sees light," Eric said. But I was already thinking ahead. If we could link Torin to judicial misconduct, it would flip the narrative. No more spoiled heiress clawing for scraps. No more distraction play. It would be corruption. On the record. "I want to go public," I said. Mara looked up. "Are you sure?" "I want the court of public opinion before I walk into an actual one." I remembered every time they laughed at me behind closed doors, every toast that erased me, every headline that reduced me to a strange daughter or disgraced sibling. No more. I stood up, breath steady. "We hold a press conference. We show the will. We leak the email. We dare them to sue louder." "You'll lose friends," Eric warned. I smiled bitterly. Then they weren't mine to begin with. That night I returned to the estate, not to plead, but to reclaim. I didn't knock. I walked through the front door like I belonged there, because I did. The house was too quiet, too still. But I found Harlan in the sitting room sipping bourbon like the world hadn't shifted under his feet. "You're trespassing," he said calmly. "I'm home," I replied. He didn't look at me, just swirled the glass in his hand. "Enjoy your circus while it lasts. Torin's lawyers are already preparing their next motion." "Let them," I said. "We're preparing ours too." He finally turned, eyes narrowing. "Is this about revenge?" "No," I said. "It's about what's right, what was stolen, what's mine." He stood slowly, walked to the window and stared out into the night. "You think you're strong," he said, "but this world doesn't reward strength. It rewards ruthlessness." I walked to the door, paused. Then maybe I'm both. As I left, my phone buzzed. It was Mara. Her message was just one sentence. "Check your inbox. Something big just hit." The email from Mara sat unopened for a full minute. I hovered my finger over the screen, heart pounding like it already knew what waited inside. Finally, I tapped it. A scanned image filled the screen, rough handwriting on yellowed paper, dated just 3 months before my mother died. The subject line read, "Journal entry, for her." Mara's message above was short. "Found in the attic, wedged behind a beam near the safe. She meant you to see it." My hands trembled as I enlarged the image, each word tugging me backward in time. Liora will never be what Harlan wants her to be, and I thank God for that. She's fire when they want glass. She listens too closely and forgives too easily, but she sees everything. If you're reading this, sweet girl, you made it here. You survived them. Now build something that outlives them both. I'm sorry for what I couldn't protect. I'm not sorry for what I left behind. I covered my mouth with my hand. I didn't cry. I just sat there still, letting the truth settle like dust around me. She hadn't just planned to leave something. She planned for me, to outlast him, to outlive the fear. That night I stayed in the attic until the sun broke through the slats. The beams glowed gold with morning light, and for once the house didn't feel haunted. It felt awake. By noon, I stood in the main conference room of Vance Realty. Well, what was left of it? The portrait of my father had been removed from the entrance. The brass plate on the reception desk was being polished for re-engraving. And the staff? They stood waiting, cautious, unsure, but watching. I took a breath and stepped up. "I know most of you didn't sign up for this storm," I began. "You came here to work, to build homes for others while protecting your own. Somewhere along the way, that mission got buried under power games and lawsuits." I looked around the room, at Eric, at Yvette, at the marketing assistant who handed me tissues 2 days ago. My mother started this company with my father, but only one of them tried to keep it human. She believed in second chances, in women who'd been overlooked, in stories no one else would fund. I pulled the journal page from my coat pocket and held it for just a moment. She left more than a legacy. She left a map. The silence was thick, listening. "I'm renaming this company," I said, "effective immediately. It will no longer be Vance Realty." The room shifted. Whispers, quick glances. "It will be called Vance and Hope, to honor where we came from and who we're becoming." Yvette smiled. Eric gave a small, solemn nod. The rest? Still processing, but no one walked out. That afternoon, we launched a website rebrand. Within hours, emails began to pour in. Women who had worked for Vance and quit under Torin's watch. Clients who'd been ignored. Daughters who'd watched their mothers get silenced in boardrooms and dinner tables and estate fights. And somewhere in those messages, tucked between subject lines like "thank you" and "finally," was a short one from someone named Caroline. "I left law school 5 years ago because of a man like your father. Watching you stand up makes me want to go back." I read it 3 times. That night, I climbed into the attic one last time, not for answers, but for closure. I opened one of the dusty trunks and found my mother's paintbrushes still wrapped in silk. She always said art was just truth dressed in color. I sat by the attic window, journal page in hand, moonlight pouring over me like a blessing. Build something that outlives them both. I would. I already had. But as I packed the last box to bring down, my phone buzzed again. A new number, just 4 words. "The will has more." I froze. More? What did I miss? The text haunted me all night. "The will has more." I didn't recognize the number, but by now I'd learned not to ignore the quiet voices. They were usually the ones telling the truth. Morning came like a verdict. Gray sky, sharp air. Silence in the attic that wasn't quite empty. I went back up alone, flashlight in one hand, Gideon's envelope in the other. I'd reread the second will a dozen times, but something about that message kept tugging at me. I sat cross-legged near the safe, eyes scanning every word until, there. Tiny text in the footer. Appendix B, personal addendum, stored separately by counsel for protected release. I blinked. How had I missed that? I texted Gideon. Me, did Mom include a personal addendum? His reply came within minutes. Gideon, meet me at the estate, I have it. She wanted it sealed until you reclaimed your name. And so we met, again in the study, the same place where Harlan once sat smugly behind his fortress of mahogany, but this time it was just Gideon and me. He handed me a sealed envelope, no legal jargon, just my name, in her handwriting. Inside was a short letter and a photo, Mom and me, on the garden bench. She looked tired in the picture, but her smile held something fierce. You were always the future. I'm sorry I didn't say it out loud more, but I wrote it in ink where they couldn't erase you. I chose you, over him, over tradition, over fear. This is your house now. Do with it what I couldn't. Open the doors to women like us. I couldn't breathe. I clutched the photo, thumb tracing the edge like it might vanish if I let go. By the end of that week, we made the announcement public. Vance and Hope wasn't just a rebrand anymore. It was a mission. We launched the Nina Fund, granting seed money to women recovering from coercive relationships, unjust terminations, and closed-door inheritances. The backlash came fast. Torin gave a bitter interview accusing me of media manipulation. Harlan filed a last-ditch appeal, claiming undue influence. They both lost. The judicial panel reviewed the evidence, Gideon's documentation, Mara's witness testimony, and the leaked email linking Torin to Judge Renner. The appeal collapsed within days. 1 week later, a single line in the court summary confirmed it. Petitioner's claims dismissed in entirety, full control awarded to Ms. Liora M. Vance. It was done. I drove to the estate alone that night. Not to gloat, not to mourn, just to breathe. I sat on the balcony my mother loved, the one overlooking the hills beyond Asheville. The wind was quiet. No more whispers behind doors. I thought of the girl who once cried in this house, afraid of being invisible, and of the woman who stood now, still bruised, still healing, but no longer afraid. Mara joined me a few minutes later, holding 2 mugs of tea. She passed one to me, then sat beside me with a soft smile. "No press today?" she asked. "Just peace." She sipped, then looked out. "So what now?" I thought for a moment. "I keep going," I said. "I build what she couldn't. I fight for girls like Caroline. I give my future the name it deserves." She nudged my arm. "And maybe take a nap?" I laughed. "Eventually." The lesson, if there was one, had been etched into every bruised moment of the last few months. No one gives you power. You claim it, brick by brick, word by word, line by stubborn, handwritten line. Because surviving is only the first victory. Rebuilding, redefining. That's what makes the scars worth it. So, if you've made it this far with me, thank you. If you've ever been dismissed, erased, or underestimated, welcome. And if this story lit a fire in you, don't let it go dim. Subscribe for more true feeling stories. Like, comment your favorite moment, and share this with someone who needs a little justice. And if you want another twist-heavy tale of power, family, and legacy, watch what's next.